Good afternoon once again. It's absolutely right that the issues that you face and the issues that we face and my colleagues face in England are very similar. We've heard today, haven't we? Magna talked about heads being the most important. Minister Lear about incentivising teachers. The Minister talked about motivating teams. Fiona talked about on the team or on the bus. And Geir talked about a reason to get up in the morning to go to school. I didn't realise he's talking about himself there. So, what I hope to do over the minutes is just touch on a few ideas to give you a few framework about how you might think, the way you might think, the approaches you might take when you're faced with some of these interesting challenges of leadership and management. The title here says Best Practice of School Management. I think that means of how we run the school, because I want to differentiate slightly between leadership and management in a moment. So just to put things into context, right. I'm from an organisation called Haileybury Imperial Service College. It opened in 1864. We've got 800 odd pupils. It's a boarding school. Now that's cropped up already before. That means our pupils live with us for 32 weeks of the year. We have them 24/7. We currently have about 400 staff. We have a huge site. We are very blessed. We're just north of London. And that is a photograph, an aerial photograph of what our site looks like. In the centre of our site is the main quadrangle, and that's what that looks like. Okay? Now, let me make it very clear to you right at the outset. Yes, we have some beautiful buildings, and yes, we have some beautiful grounds, but they count for nothing compared with the staff we have. They're the asset of the school, the real asset. The rest is window dressing. Just remember that. It's very important. Okay, just a quick burst about, so who am I? I've been running schools now for 17 years. Doesn't make me an expert, far from it. I still learn every day. I'm on the non-executive side of two schools that we have in Kazakhstan. So I know what it's a little bit like to be on both sides of this slight divide within schools. Recently, Haileybury in the UK, at the, shall we say, encouragement of our central government, took over the running of a local government school, roughly 800 pupils. And in many ways, that school perhaps mirrors more of what most of you probably face. So I understand some of the challenges there too. I haven't always been involved in schools. Before being in a school, I was the CEO of an engineering business. Okay, so let's just think about best practice for school management. What are we actually trying to do in a school? Now that might sound a funny place to start, but to me it's the most important. What are we trying to actually achieve? Now, we'll all have a slightly different view of this, but my view slightly is that we're trying to blend resources, people, money, buildings, the environment, to achieve the best possible outcomes for our pupils. Now, to me, that's just absolutely given. We're there for the benefit of the pupils. It's a huge privilege to be in charge and play a role in educating the next generation. We'll talk about, in a short while, about motivation, but we've already heard, I think, wasn't said as explicitly as this, but if you're in education for money, you're in the wrong game. Go and do something else. Okay? We all operate within considerable constraints. I would love the Minister to be able to give you all more money. I would love the Minister to give Haileybury Turnford more money, more resources. But here's a funny thing. Suppose the minister could give you 10% more. Yes, you could do great things with that 10% more, but that 10% more would soon become the new norm. And then you'll be wanting more. And of course, every school wants more. I don't know of any school that's got enough. Okay? But because the resources we have are constrained, we must achieve best value. Now, this is a housekeeping, this is a management issue. Maybe you have to do running the budgets yourself. Maybe you have someone who helps you do it. Maybe you have a finance team. That will depend on the size of your school. But everybody involved in a school needs to achieve best value for whatever they're doing. And I've touched on this. I differentiate leadership skills and management skills. They have different languages. And when it comes to motivating your teams, it's quite helpful, I think, to understand the differences between the two and the different characteristics that you might need to adopt. Now, I just want to introduce two concepts, two thoughts. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Mr. Maslow. 1943, Abraham Maslow developed the theory of human motivation. His little pyramid, okay? Sorry, it's in English. Oh, it's being translated. Excellent. Okay, so for those who might not have come across it, he talks about basic needs, and I'm talking basic needs: oxygen, food, water, basic needs to survive. He moves on to safety needs: warmth, housing, and the such like. He talks about social needs. Humans generally, despite the efforts of one or two particular individuals to try and convince us not, are a social animal. We like each other's company. Watching you lot talk to each other outside this main hall is wonderful to see exchange of information and ideas. He then talks about esteem needs and self-actualization. And it's those top two that I just want you to pause and just think about for a moment. If you're in school for money, you're in the wrong game. Okay? What we get out of being in a school, I hope, is the look on the face of a pupil who's achieved something they never thought they could do. The look on the face of a pupil who opens an envelope at the end of school exams, and their face lights up because they've got what they want. Now, we've all got bills to pay, of course, but most people involved in schools tick that box relatively early down this pyramid. So what we need to do is to develop our own value set and encourage our staff to develop a value set of shared values to do with pupil-centric activity and pupil achievement. And if you breathe that as a philosophy and an approach in schools, your staff will pick it up. Okay? The next little person I want to talk about is a fellow called Max Weber. He was a German, born 1864. He was principally a sociologist and political economist. He is best known for his thesis about Protestant ethics. Park that for a minute. The bit is, I think, that's important. In 1899, he wrote some papers about the theory of a bureaucracy. Now, by a bureaucracy, he meant an organization that is not run for profit. So there are many organizations that are bureaucracies, but we're one of them. And he says suggests that in those sorts of organizations, the ones we work in, because there isn't profit as a yardstick of people's success, people start adopting other measures of how important they are and their worth to the organization. When I first started working at a school 17 years ago, it wasn't Haileybury, it's the one before. My first day, I turned up, and right beside the door to the school was a big sign saying, "Car park place reserved for him." First thing I did is say, take that down. The first person who gets here in the morning gets the first and best car parking space. I don't need to have that reserved for me. Actually, I was the first in every morning anyway, so I got the car parking space. Okay? Some people use evidence of their worth to the organization when they talk about the size of their office, the size of their budget. I'm guilty. I said to you on the second slide, I think it was, Haileybury's got 400 employees. Now, I'm sure there are some people here who've got more. But often when I say that, people say, wow, you must be an important big school. Actually, my way of seeing these things, the fewer employees you have, the better, because that means more money is not spent on colleagues, but it's spent on the pupils. Does that all make sense so far? Thank you. So, there are times when you have to exhibit the characteristics of a leader, and there are times you have to exhibit the characteristics of a manager. They are two different skill sets, and it's important, in my view, to understand the different language and the different skill sets, because then when you are dealing with your staff and your pupils, you can adopt the language that is appropriate for the circumstances of the occasion. So, for example, managers have subordinates. Leaders have followers. Now, I'm overstating this to make the point, but the point is there. Let us just run through a few thoughts about the sort of language that managers employ. And there are times, if you're managing a budget meeting or something like that, you need to be a manager. You need to exert control. So managers get paid for doing things, control. They tend to be transactional. They get excited about systems, structures, tasks undertaken for promise or reward. Managers tend to be, and this is where it starts getting more interesting, risk and conflict averse. They tend to ask questions like how and when. They focus on the bottom line, and typically they have short-term targets. There are times when we need to be managers. There are times when I have to sit my staff down and adopt my manager's hat. But the exciting bit, I think, the bit that builds things, that doesn't just roll endlessly forward in the housekeeping of day to day, but the bit that's exciting is when you start doing some leadership. Come on. So, leaders develop enthusiasm and energy. And you will do this. When you stand up in front of your staff room, your colleagues, and start an academic year, I'm sure you give an inspirational speech. When you stand up in front of your pupils, you don't stand there generally as a manager managing your pupils. You stand there as the leader of the organization. It's our job to develop enthusiasm. They tend to have charisma, focus on people, transformational beliefs. We will be the best school. Not every school can be the best school, but we will be the best school we can be. They tend to be risk takers. They ask questions like what and why. They have longer term targets, and they focus on the horizon, and they have independence of mind. Next week, if this microphone worked, next week I've got to give a talk to my staff, okay? I've got 200 of them coming in for a talk, and this is what I'll do. I'll walk around in front, I'll take my jacket off, and I'll get in amongst them, and I'll walk around a bit, and then talk to one or two individually. Now, to me, this doesn't come naturally. I have to work hard at it. People can learn to do that within the constraints of the technology. Okay? Now then, so how do you influence the teams that you work with? They will pick up from you pretty soon, I think, and I've experienced, the style you adopt. Now, a typical manager will look at his or her organization, and this is a simplistic, stylized one. There they are. The manager is person A. They have direct reports, person B, and they have direct reports, people C. Okay? This, to me, speaks of management. This speaks to me that I, person A, the most important person in the organisation, I've got the biggest office. I don't believe in any of that, and I think this is very unhelpful when it comes to getting the best out of our staff. So what do? This is the leader's view, and this is right to adopt this at some stage, not always. Okay, turn the page upside down. I'm now at the bottom of the page. I am the least important person in the room. If you think about it, in some respects, we're here to provide a service to our pupils and our parents and the community we work in. Who actually delivers the service that the pupils experience? So C could be a classroom teacher. C could be the person who mows the lawn outside. C could be the person who peels potatoes in the kitchen or cleans the lavatories. Now, these jobs in schools have to happen. How do you enfranchise, how do you incentivise all the staff in the school? President John F. Kennedy, visiting the Space Center when America was still trying to send someone to the moon. So this is a long time ago now. John F. Kennedy was a long time ago. As he was concluding his visit, he came back to the main reception hall, and they, of course, were surrounded by the great and the good of NASA, and a door opened from the gents' loo that went off the main reception, and out came a fellow with a bucket and mop. JFK walked across to that person, much to the horror of the chief people of NASA, and said, "Hi, really nice to see you. What are you doing? What's your role here?" And the guy said, "Well, I'm helping send the first person to the moon. I'm playing my part in the program." Wouldn't it be wonderful if the fellow or lady that cleans the lavatories in your school, when asked that question, says, "I'm helping to educate the next generation"? Perhaps they all do already, I don't know. Not all of ours do, but we try very hard to get them to be on side. Fiona talks about getting the right people. I remember watching a TV interview of the great American industrialist Howard Hughes. Again, this was a long time ago. And the young reporter thrust the microphone under Howard Hughes's face and said, "So, Mr. Hughes, what's the secret of your success?" He was a very successful man. And the great man paused and he said, "Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's having the right people doing the right job. And I will go to extraordinary ends to get the right people doing the right job." I say this slightly embarrassed because it shows in some respects a failure on my behalf. I have 10 people directly reporting to me, so I have 10 Bs, if you like. I've been at Haileybury 8 and a bit years. Only 3 of the 10 are the original 10 that I got. 1 has retired, and all the rest have been changed for different people. I try very hard to help people understand our mission and what we're trying to do. But ultimately, if they don't get it, they don't get it. And they have to go because they drag everyone down. So we part company amicably, but we part company. So underlying all this, it seems to me, a skill set of understanding when you've got to behave slightly differently, but underlying it all is the art of communication. Now, you will know this because I'm sure in teacher training and so on, you will have covered it. But the most important thing, it seems to me, in communication is having confidence, not arrogance. You don't need arrogance. We need confidence of the leader, what they're talking about. I said that next week I've got 200 staff coming, and I shall thank them for the work that they've been doing for the school. I will have a series of policy announcements, sort of general housekeeping things. But at the very end of it, and I can tell you this now because I've been thinking about it, and this is what I mean about thinking about the leadership bit. I'm going to draw an analogy between Haileybury and a large jigsaw puzzle we have at home. It's a 1,200-piece jigsaw puzzle. Haileybury is 800 pupils and 400 staff. 1,200 pieces of a jigsaw that go to make up a picture. When the picture is complete, there are no pieces left. And when the picture is complete, if you take one piece out, the whole picture is incomplete. And there is a metaphor there, and that's what I will talk to them in those terms, so that they understand that their piece, which may not be very glamorous, is important to the whole. The other bits of arts communication, I'm sure you know probably better than me. We have generally 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. Interesting one, knowledge, you know. In the engineering days, I used to find the most helpful way when I had a problem and I wanted to find out what it is, was to get down onto the shop floor and ask the people actually doing. Ask the C's. Hey, we have this problem, what's the solution? And most often they will come up with the best solution. And better still, because it's their solution, they'll adopt it and want to do it. And so, lastly, take risks now and again. Expose yourself to the dreaded criticism. Now, lastly, we never stop learning. I never stop learning, and the person who stops learning should not be in a school. So there are 7, I'm told, but you will know much more about this than me, key factors and styles of learning. Try and adopt them when you're talking to your staff. Find out. I talked to a gardener about the way he prunes a wisteria plant in a hugely different way from the way I talk to our financial controller who runs the accounts. I know, not because they do different jobs, but I know that one likes to have things in front of her, she can look at it, and the other one thinks abstractly about the beautiful blooms that are coming. Try and adopt the language to communicate. Okay, so just to wrap up, try and develop to understand when to manage and when to lead. Develop the different skill sets required. Hire the right people, get rid of the wrong people, and always put pupils at the centre of all your decisions. And that's it.